Thanks to our Patreon members for helping to make this episode possible, and we're now available on all the major podcasting platforms. You can find more information at the links below. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to part 2 of the Symposium, where we're going to get an actual speech finally in at last. But first, two points important to make. One is the framing of this as a discussion of love, and second, who Phaedrus is, which is very important to understand the speech that he is about to deliver. So first, the framing element is the claim that, and apparently this was Phaedrus' idea, it's like, hey, here we are, we're not going to drink heavily, we're going to just be mellow, so let's have a conversation, and let's structure this conversation around the idea of praising love, because Phaedrus has apparently said before that, like, hey, there's all these myths and poems to the other gods, but for some reason, love is overlooked. And one of the questions you can ask here is this true? And it is kind of true, but the distinction is important because, again, Plato is working across the lines here a bunch. And one of the things is, the word they're using for love here is eros. And eros is an ancient god that was not a big part of the Greek mythos system at the time of the Symposium. However, both Aphrodite and Dionysus, who are associated with love, particularly Aphrodite, there were lots of myths about. So what's being invoked here, theoretically, by Phaedrus, is the idea of eros as not so much as a god, although he is obviously a god, but in the sense of this more like primordial force. This is important, again, when we hear how Phaedrus opens his invocation, basically, of his speech. So that is a key detail, because you're going to see what Plato does to kind of shift the debate as we go along. And the ground is continually shifting. In fact, almost every speech starts with a like, hey, well, you could kind of approach it that way, but let's do it from a different way. But the original framing is, let's talk about the god Eros, because there's not a lot of poetry and praise of him. So we should rectify that by talking about why we think love is great and what love is. But again, in invoking Eros as a god rather than Aphrodite or Dionysus, what you end up with is a sense of the primordial power of love as sort of almost an abstract philosophical concept, not surprising given Plato, rather than the god specifically. And Socrates, of course, says, well, how can we not think this is a good idea when everybody here is, of course, interested in this, and so we're all going to go with this? What a great, let's do that. And then Socrates says, and let Phaedrus begin the praise of love, and good luck to him. So there we go. So everybody gets ready. Off we go. So who is Phaedrus now, before we get the first speech? Now, Phaedrus is mentioned in a couple of places in ancient literature, in 2 of the dialogues of Socrates, the Symposium, and the Phaedrus, and he generally seems to be a well-liked, well-meaning, charming, attractive aristocrat, interested in wisdom, but not particularly wise. So what the tone of Phaedrus and the sort of the impression we get of Phaedrus is of someone who is well-liked, well-respected, but genuine, sincere, but not necessarily wise. And so you're not getting a lie, but but there's no reason to believe that Phaedrus is giving us the absolute truth, right? Like this is the distinction you're going to get. And what we're used to often is a debate between somebody who's right and someone who's wrong, and then the wrong person will be revealed and the right person will be like, haha, I've won. This is not how Plato works. Plato shows us a well-meaning, sincere, yet just slightly misled character who is Phaedrus. And the same thing occurs in the dialogue that is the Phaedrus, where you get a much fuller sense of who he is. But this seems to be the character that he embodied. Importantly, Phaedrus is Theban. He's from Thebes. And that's when I say this is a weirdly political text. This launches the politics from the very beginning. In the ancient world, Thebes was, at this time, Thebes is noted as being powerful, it's wealthy, it's influential, And it actually did seem to field a military unit that was made up of lovers. So when Phaedrus mentions this indirectly in the text, well, he mentions it directly, but he doesn't mention Thebes. Everybody at the party, everybody who was anybody in the Greek world, knew he was from Thebes, understands what he's talking about. And so while this is a speech in praise of love, it also works out to be a speech in praise of Thebes. And because remember, Plato is really upset about the condition, and many other people, that Athens has found itself, the place Athens has found itself in. It's fallen, it's lost its power, it's lost its way, it's confused, it's vexed, it's lived through this tragic period. And here comes a speech in praise of love that also works out to be a speech in praise of the way Thebes governs. And no one at the party would have missed this. And so, again, a weirdly, seemingly subtle, but actually not at all subtle to people who are in Athens at this time, political argument is coming with this argument about love. Okay, so there's your framing background. Now, on to the speech itself. And this is important, again, because Phaedrus says that Eros is the eldest of the gods, which is an honor to him. And proof of this claim to that honor is that his parents are never mentioned, and that, as Hesiod says, first chaos came, then broad-bosomed earth, the everlasting seat of all that is, and love. Also, there's the notion of first in the train of gods, he fashioned love. So we get two quotes from Greek mythology that tell us, like, hey, and generally chaos is not seen so much as a god, more as just an embodiment of natural, untamed power. Then you get earth and love. By the way, he does not mention there's also Tartarus there, but we'll just leave that aside because we can go off on a tangent on early Greek mythopoetic outlook. But certainly love is right there, either the first or with the first, earth and love. So wow, here's our most ancient, most powerful God. Why don't we have poems to him? So first we affirm that he is the eldest God. And then he says, and not only is he the eldest, he is also the source of the greatest benefit to us. For I know not any greater blessing to a young man who is beginning life than a virtuous lover, or to a lover than a beloved youth. For the principle which ought to guide of men would be to live nobly. That principle, I say, neither kindred, nor honor, nor wealth, nor any other motive is able to implant so well as love. Now, in its entirety, here you have the core of pretty much everything that's going to be discussed for the next, pages of the Symposium. Love is not just the oldest God, and this is Eros love. So this is the concept of love, Eros, who at this point, again, a very vague God in the Greek myth system with little written about him, except for like the Hesiod stuff. What love does is it implants them nobility, right? It motivates you to be noble. And to be noble and true and just was the theoretical goal of the aristocracy of the Hellenistic world. Now, they didn't always agree on how to do this, what was the best way, all of this. Okay, so that's all up for grabs. But to be noble, to be an aristocrat, was to pursue nobility. How do we do this? So the idea is to say, it's not your relatives, it's not honor or fame, it's not wealth. All those things you're not motivated by. People are motivated by those. But the best thing that motivates you to nobility, so those other things might motivate you to do terrible things or to be base, is love. The sense of honor and dishonor, without which neither states nor individuals ever do any good or great work. So there it is again. Love implants nobility because it motivates you to avoid dishonor and to achieve honor. And it is through this desire to achieve nobility and honor, and to avoid the opposite, that states and individuals do great and good works. So again, this is the politics of the individual as politics of the state. And in the Greek world, and particularly for amongst aristocrats, the idea is like, look, if we get quality people running the place, then you'll get quality results. That's the idea. The quality of the leader is the quality of the state. So what we want is noble leaders who are motivated to do noble and good and great works. And the best way to do that is through love. And so this means that the greatest blessing you can have is to have a virtuous lover, and that is to be, or a virtuous beloved. So if you're a young man, you want a virtuous lover who is going to help motivate you to learn and to do well and introduce you to society in the right way. And if you're an older man, you want a younger man who you can do all that for, and who also motivates you to be honorable and to avoid dishonor, because otherwise you would be shamed in the face of your lover. And this notion, then he goes on, and I say that a lover who is detected in doing any dishonorable act or submitting through cowardice when any dishonor is done to him will be more pained at being detected by his beloved than by being seen by his father or by his companions or by anyone else. And if there are only some way of contriving that a state or an army should be made up of lovers and their loves, they would be very best governors of their own city, abstaining from all dishonor and emulating one another in honor when fighting at each other's side. With that, a mere handful, they would overcome the world. Wow. So here it is, like in its core essence. We can unweave this, because this is going to be really, unweaving this is what we're going to be doing again for the rest of the time. It's like, okay, there's this great god Eros, and Eros implants in men the desire for men and women, but in this case we're talking about other men, to be seen as honorable in the eyes of your beloved. So you're not your, you don't want to let down your father, you don't want to let down your mother, you don't want to let down the public, all this, but who you really, really don't want to disappoint, and who you really want to shine for, and what motivates you to be great is to be seen as noble in the eyes of your beloved. That's the idea. And if we can have that desire, then we will be good and just people. We'll be the best kinds of citizens. We'll be the best kind of citizens. We'll be the mightiest warriors, because in battle we'll never retreat, because that would be shameful in the eyes of our lovers. We won't do devious things in politics, because that would be shameful in the eyes of our lovers. Right? That's the idea that he's implanting here. Obviously, he's never read Macbeth, because Lady Macbeth has a few different ideas about this, but that'll come later. But, for Phaedrus, it's like, no, Eros is this undiluted good that encourages us to do the best thing that we can possibly do. I mean, how to even talk about this? It's such a powerful and interesting concept, and again, so hugely influential in our thinking. But in the modern world, what we say is basically the same thing with money. We say, oh, if you want somebody to do something, you give them money. If you want them to work hard, you give them more money. If you want to reward them for having achieved something, you give them more money, right? Like if you're smart, then your reward is money. So we have this notion of like money centrism. For Phaedrus, he's arguing, no, what you need erocentrism, because of this relationship between the lover and the beloved will generate humans who do the best and strive to be noble. And again, the goal in Greek society, amongst particularly the aristocracy in theory, is to be noble and to be seen to be noble. And so it's just like, wow. So there is nothing greater than to be noble, and there's nothing that drives us towards nobility more powerfully than Eros. So Eros is the greatest god who derives from men the greatest opportunity and the greatest motive force towards our best achievements. So we should praise Eros very highly, because wow, that's that's what an incredible god that is. And then, of course, he's going to quote Homer, because you quote Homer for everything in the Greek world, the Hellenistic world. You just keep quoting Homer. And he says, or who would desert his beloved or fail him in the hour of danger? The veriest coward would become an inspired hero, equal to the bravest at such a time. Love would inspire him. The courage which, as Homer says, God breathes into the souls of some heroes, love of its own nature infuses into the lover. So just the nature of love gives the lover the power to be a great hero, as if inspired by the gods, just as Homer says. So, wow, how awesome is that? And then he goes on to say, again, we'll get two examples here from Greek mythology. He says, Alcestis was sacrificed herself for her husband. So her husband was fated to die early. Apollo says, and to thank him for his hospitality, again, hospitality is a big thing in the Greek world, says, hey, to the Fates, he was really nice. He was great. Like, can you not let him live a little longer? And the Fates are like, yeah, we can, but he just has to get somebody else to die. Like, we just have to kill somebody. So if it's not him, get somebody else. And so they ask his aged parents, like, hey, your guys are about to die anyway. And they say no. So his wife volunteers, Alcestis, volunteers and says, oh, if you need somebody to die, I'll die, and then my husband can live. And so they kill her, and then the gods allow her to be brought back to life, which is being implied here. So the gods, this power of love is so great and so respected by the gods that they're like, okay, we will let you come back to life, because that, what an impressive embodiment of the power of love. It so moved the gods. And then he compares it to Orpheus, whose wife dies, and so he goes down to Hades to try and retrieve her, but he goes down alive. And what Phaedrus is saying is that this is functionally cowardice, right? Alcestis goes down dead. Like, how do you get to Hades? You kill yourself, right? You allow yourself, in this case, to be killed. And that's the real sacrifice. And this is an interpretation of the myth. This is a weird interpretation, apparently, but this idea is that, the reason Orpheus couldn't bring her back is not because, he tripped and looked back or lost faith or any of this. It's because the gods were like, wow, that's kind of second rate. Like, if you really loved her, you would just die and go down to Hades to be with her, not try and trick your way through or do something else. You want her back, but you don't want her back that bad. That's the implication that Phaedrus is making. And he's saying, so that's not so the gods don't really respect that as much as the real embodiment of the power of love. And then, of course, because you always invoke Homer, we're going to get the passage from Achilles. And he says, now Achilles was quite aware, for he had been told by his mother, that he might avoid death and return home and live to a good old age, if he abstained from slaying Hector. Nevertheless, he gave his life to revenge his friend, and dared to die not only in his defense, but after he was dead. Wherefore the gods honored him even above Alcestis, and sent him to the island of the blessed. These are my reasons for affirming that love is the eldest and noblest and mightiest of the gods, and the chiefest author and giver of virtue in life, and of happiness after death. So, yeah, a lot going on here. So notice also here for Achilles, and this is part of the myth in Homer, Achilles, Hephaestus makes a shield for Achilles, and on the shield is a choice. On half the shield you have a wealthy old age with lots of children and wine and grapes, and it's all the good things in the Greek world. And on the other side of the shield is an early death. And so this is made for Achilles, so Achilles has to choose. Is he going to revenge the death of Patroclus, or is he going to simply not kill Hector and enjoy a long life? And Achilles says, no, I want to fight. I want the honor. I want to revenge my friend unto death. And that nobility, that reading of Achilles, again, this is not the only way you can read Achilles, of course, but what Phaedrus is reading, he's reading Homer to say, look, this is the embodiment of the power of love, because it's the love that Achilles has that drives him to be so great, to be able to kill Hector, to be able to achieve what he achieved. And without Patroclus, the idea is, well, he would just be so much less. He would not have had the superpower. He would not have been the Superman. We just are not our best selves. We don't do our best work. And so this notion of Eros as a driver of nobility and greatness is the argument that Phaedrus is making. And he's making this from Thebes, which at this point is very powerful, very wealthy, actually has some of these elements in its governing structure, including a band of warriors who were lovers and who famously defeat the Spartans at a crucial battle, which, in the ancient world, if you beat the Spartans, you're officially number one. So that, these mythopoetic notions that Phaedrus is deploying here are closely linked to his concept of how Theban society works, and can be read very directly as like, hey, if Athens really wants to be great, wants to be powerful, if you want to have a state that's doing good things, what you need to do is put Eros above all other forces and make that the driving value and the chief god of your city. So at this point, we should pause for a moment before we go to the next speech, because, of course, the next speech is a pause where everybody goes, hey, what are you talking about, Phaedrus? And look at, just think about how strange this must ring to our ears, that what will drive you to greatness is Eros. This is the core, or a core part of this argument that Phaedrus is deploying. And again, in our world, rarely have I ever heard this invoked. We see romantic love or passionate love to drive us to do crazy things, occasionally great things, occasionally stupid things, but as like a foundation for a state. Like, hey, how do you have a good state? You have people driven by love who do not want to be dishonored in public. This is the foundation. How do you do well in school? Have a lover who you don't want to let down by performing poorly. This as that what should motivate us, what should fill our hearts, what makes us noble is Eros, is erotic love and attachment to another human being. This is the foundation of greatness. Wow. It's you'll see why this, of course, anybody who knows anything about the New Testament theology should recognize how this is coming, right? Like, oh, hey, wait a second, like the love of Jesus and all this stuff. Yeah, you're starting to get a taste of this. This will become very much more obvious and very much more powerful coming up. But we don't have this as a strong social more for personal greatness. We tend to think of it, as far as I can tell, and correct me in the comments if you feel I've gone wrong here. We tend to see it as a more personal and private thing. Number one, this doesn't drive you to do great public works. It doesn't make you the best version of yourself. It might make you the happiest version of yourself. We say, for success, you need grit and you need determination and you need dedication and you need all these things. And what Phaedrus is saying, yeah, sure, you need those things, but those things come from erotic love. Like get your love life straightened out, get your Eros focused, and have someone you don't want to let down, have someone that you're strongly attached to, and that you would never want to see anything ignoble associated with you. And now you're going to work and you're going to do things in the right way. You'll be motivated and you'll be honorable, and no one will be able to shift you from your path. You'll be brave. You won't be a coward, right? And all of that will flow from erotic attachment to another person. Now, wow, right? Like this is all my how to do well in school guidelines that I ever received. None of them had, okay, step one, you really need to get a girlfriend. You need to really get a boyfriend. You really need to get an erotic attachment, because if you can get that sorted, then you'll be on your way. But yeah, this is, to me, maybe other people got this as a strong message. This was not a strong message I received in my community. And even business school, like you rarely see this in business school. It's like, look, what you really need is a lover who will motivate you to do things so that you can achieve greatness. This doesn't seem to be operable. Despite that, we do have that other strain in our society where we do recognize, like, oh, people do sacrifice themselves for love. People do sacrifice themselves and do great things because of love. They're inspired by their lovers. They want to do well by them. We do have this also as a concept, but again, it's not seen as core. It seems, I don't know, romantic love just seems kind of, slightly crazy, slightly unhinged, but valuable, but more, again, as a personal fulfillment rather than a way you live a noble life or would found a state. And so Phaedrus has really taken this argument and gone mad with it. But again, he's comparing Thebes to Athens. It's a very direct comparison. He's saying, look, Athens is not doing very well. Look at Thebes. Here's how we do stuff in Thebes. You might want to think about this. And he's also saying, without any defense, that it is the older male lover with the younger male lover that is the best version of this. Right? He never says why this is the case. He just says, well, obviously this is how you do this. This is the noblest version of erotic love, even though it happens with men and women. It happens in many other ways. The noblest version of this is the love of the older man and the younger man. This will be explored more fully later in the text. And this is even more powerful than the love of parents for children, which of course we see in the Alcestis myth, or the love of a male for a female in the case of the Orpheus myth, right? So he's making these comparisons and saying, well, yeah, you've got these myths. Alcestis does pretty well. She loves more than the parents love. So that makes that erotic love and that attachment even more powerful. But it's really the Achilles Patroclus model from Homer, which is always going to seal the deal, because whatever is in Homer, which is everything, is correct. So ponder this, ask yourself, right? I really think this is a moment, again, to stop and go, what is the truth? What is the veracity? What is the power of this argument? Where do we see in our own lives or in our culture around us or in the activities that people actually pursue rather than just what they're saying they're doing? Do you see people who embody Eros in this way? Do you see the erotic attachment to another human? That does it drive them to do good? Does it drive them to do evil? What is the source of nobility? And so for this first speech, you have Phaedrus, the well-meaning, sincere Theban, raising all the issues, but clearly answering none of them, right? He just is just so, as the next person says, well, that might be slightly oversimplistic there, old Phaedrus. Thanks for that lovely speech. But we're going to need to make it more subtle. And again, this is the genius of Plato, because we get this just completely not unhinged, just completely no questions asked. Eros is the greatest, obviously the greatest. He's the oldest. This is the model that we use in Thebes. Sorry about you Athenians not doing so well. You might want to think about changing your ways. But without any, no complexity, no subtlety, no moment of, really, is that what these myths mean? And hey, hasn't even one time someone done something wrong when motivated by erotic love? That seems sort of unlikely. These kinds of questions don't seem to bother Phaedrus at all. It seems to be his character to just roll on. But now we have the groundwork laid out. This is the territory we're going to be operating on. And notice the key points here, and I'll just repeat them one more time, then ask yourself about this, and then we'll be ready for the next speeches, which is when the arguments really start. But notice love is associated immediately with nobility, right? This is the ground of nobility. We all know that nobility is what we're seeking. And this will become hugely important as we go forward in the symposium, because it's a lot of shifting from love to nobility. But this linkage stays pretty strong, that these erotic impulses, the power of love and desire and drive, need to be harnessed and has something innate and important to do with nobility, wisdom, and goodness. And it's that core message and that core groundwork that is opened up here. And again, linked to the notion that, Athens isn't doing so well because they've fallen off the path somehow. Now, whether the Theban approach is the path we should take, Phaedrus, of course, thinks it is because he's Theban. But we'll see the other speakers are not necessarily so convinced. And finally, as I mentioned, and working on another level, so we have the nobility related to love, related to what's the best kinds of relationships, i.e. also what's the best kind of life to live. So lots of questions there. We have the critique of the Athenian city-state and its sad status compared to Thebes, the wealthy neighboring state. And then we have this invocation of Eros as the old god. And notice we're going to shift grounds immediately away from that to a certain extent. But again, when I said that Plato is also consistently criticizing the mythopoetic structure of his society, here it is. It's right from the get-go. Like let's start making all of the assumptions that people have about what the myths are, what the myths mean, what the narratives are, who the important gods are, and how we understand them. Let's just start cracking that from day one, from the first moment, but all in the name of praising love. So who can be mad at you for praising love? No one can get upset at you for praising love. That's just a great thing. But notice that we're already in that's the love we're talking about. We're talking about the original sort of chaos earth Gaia Eros, like that love, not Aphrodite and Dionysius. Like wouldn't that be the ones we're talking about? As you'll see, of course, this is the ground will shift several more times. And it's like, okay, it's reasonable to do that. But even the participants say, we've shifted the ground because this is not how we usually talk about it, because we don't usually make poems to this Eros. Why not? What have we been doing? Let's start remedying that. This is the whole, the framing of this speech. So, again, a simple seeming, and it is a simple speech, basically. We have love causes nobility. Eros is the greatest, oldest god. He generates nobility in people's hearts because you don't want to seem shameful in front of your beloved. Ipso facto, it's the greatest force in the world, makes your state good. Here's a couple of myths and a passage from Homer that all demonstrate that the myths and Homer back this up. So, hey, I must be right. Eros is a great god. Eros is, in fact, the greatest god because he gives humans the greatest good, which is nobility. Very simple speech. But, again, contextually, super complicated. So, take some moments, look back through the passages, and like I said, if you have a definition of love in your own mind, and if you can ponder, when is Eros working for us? When is it working against us? When do we invoke it culturally as a good thing? When do we go, no, it's an evil force that needs to be, caged up or made illegal or whatever? Like all those subtleties, those are at work here. And the clearer we have them in our own minds, the easier it is to see what Plato's doing in each of these speeches. So, Symposium, first speech, and part 2. Thank you very much.